It was 1992. A gray-haired German man stood trembling at the entrance of a community hall in a small Russian town. Inside waited someone he had not seen in 5 decades. Someone he could have killed in seconds, yet chose not to. Why did a German sniper spare a Soviet soldier in the middle of one of the most brutal fronts of World War II? What happened in the 50 years that followed? And how did 2 men, once enemies sworn to kill each other, come face to face again? This time with open arms instead of rifles. Today, we uncover one of the war's most unexpected stories of mercy. 50 years earlier, the winter of 1942. The Eastern Front was a frozen graveyard stretching across the Soviet Union. Temperatures plunged to 30 degrees, rifles jammed from ice, and soldiers survived on whatever frozen bread they could chisel open. For the German Wehrmacht, morale was crumbling. For the Red Army, desperation fueled every step. Among the German forces was Oskar Weber, a 24-year-old sniper from Bavaria. He was quiet, disciplined, and frighteningly precise. One of the few men who could lie completely still while snow piled on his shoulders. He had been taught only one rule: a good sniper has no hesitation. But on a frozen morning near the Don River, that rule would break. Oskar crawled into his concealed position, a shallow depression camouflaged with branches and ice. Through his scope, he scanned a shattered Soviet outpost movement. A figure appeared, stumbling between ruined barrels. A Soviet soldier no more than 20, wrapped in a torn winter coat, clutching a rifle with a cracked stock. His face was pale lips frozen blue. Oskar exhaled slowly. His heartbeat steadied. The crosshairs settled on the man's chest. This was it. Routine, mechanical, expected. And then the soldier slipped on the ice, falling to his knees, not in fear, but from exhaustion. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't threatening anyone. He was simply trying to survive another hour in a war meant to kill him. Something inside Oskar hesitated. He watched the man struggle back to his feet, wobbling like a candle in a storm. "What am I doing?" Oskar whispered under his breath. Not a question of aim, but of purpose. He had pulled the trigger hundreds of times before. Why was this different? Maybe it was the soldier's youth. Maybe the hopelessness in his eyes. Maybe Oskar was simply tired of killing. He lifted his finger from the trigger. A sniper sparing an enemy. In that moment, Oskar broke the unspoken rule of the battlefield, and the Soviet soldier, later identified as Viktor Mikhailov, walked out of Oskar's sights still alive. Let's pause for a second. What would you have done? Would you follow orders without hesitation, or listen to that quiet voice inside that says, "Enough"? Not an easy question in the middle of World War II, but Oskar's choice that day would ripple through 5 decades. The battlefield shifted. Units retreated, advanced, froze, starved, and vanished. Days later, the area where Oskar once lay hidden was swallowed by artillery. He never saw Viktor again. Not during the war, not after. To Oskar, the spared soldier was just a fleeting moment of humanity in a world collapsing into chaos. Viktor Mikhailov had no idea how close he had come to death that morning. He only remembered feeling watched, as if someone's eyes were on him from a distant hill. But he survived. He fought in subsequent battles, was wounded twice, and eventually returned home to a small village outside Voronezh. Life after war was not gentle. Food was scarce. Money was tighter. But Viktor married, worked at a tractor factory, and raised 2 sons. Yet some nights, when the wind howled like artillery, he felt a strange sense of gratitude toward someone he had never met. "It feels like someone spared me," he once told his wife. He wasn't wrong. The sniper's life. After the war, Oscar's story was different. Captured in 1944, he spent 2 years in a Soviet POW camp. Ironically, he might have walked past Victor's town without knowing. When he returned to Germany, Oscar lived quietly working as a watchmaker. He avoided war movies, avoided conversations about campaigns, and avoided anything that reminded him of the trigger he once chose not to pull. But as he grew older, that memory, the Soviet soldier he didn't kill, kept resurfacing, not as guilt, but as a strange comfort. A single moment when he felt human again. In 1991, almost 50 years after the incident, Oscar stumbled upon a newspaper article about Soviet veterans seeking to reconnect with former German soldiers for reconciliation events. Most people skim articles like this and move on. But not Oscar. That one spared soldier had lived in Oscar's mind for decades. He didn't know his name, rank, or unit, only that he had worn a torn winter coat near the Don River. Could he still be alive? Could he somehow be found? It sounded impossible, ridiculous, like searching for a single snowflake after the storm had passed. Yet Oscar wrote a letter. It described the exact location the winter morning and the young soldier he had seen through his scope. He mailed it to a veterans organization in Russia and waited, across the border. The letter traveled through translators, historians, and archivists. Weeks became months. Then one morning in late 1992, an elderly Russian man received a phone call. "We have found someone who may have saved your life." Viktor Mikhailov sat speechless as he read the translated letter. The man describing the incident knew every detail: the hill, the frozen barrels, even the cracked rifle stock. Victor felt a chill, not a fearful one, but a realization. This man kept me alive, and I never knew. When Victor told his wife, she paused, stared at him, and said, "So you're telling me the only reason you're alive is because a German sniper had a soft heart?" Victor shrugged. Maybe he missed. "No," she said. "You don't live with me for 40 years because someone missed." Even in powerful stories, a small smile resets the mind. A reunion event was scheduled in a community hall near Victor's town. Victor sent Oscar an invitation. 3 simple words: "Please come meet me." Oscar folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and booked a flight even though he had never traveled outside Germany since the war. He was terrified, hopeful, uncertain. But he knew one thing. He needed to finish the story he started with a single act of mercy. The approach. It was December 1992. Oscar stood outside the hall gripping the doorknob with trembling hands. What if Victor hated him? What if Victor blamed him for the war, for everything Germany had done? What if Victor didn't come at all? He took a breath and stepped inside. Veterans, families, and journalists moved around the room, but Oscar saw only one man, Victor. White-haired, steady-eyed, wearing a simple gray suit. Their eyes met. Time froze, not like the battlefield freeze of 1942, but the stillness of 2 lives finally circling back to where they had diverged. The meeting. Victor took a step forward, then another, and then he extended his hand. Oscar didn't shake it. He pulled Victor into a hug. 2 men who could have been enemies now stood silently, embracing like old friends reunited after a lifetime of separation. Their conversation for hours they talked. Victor described the battles he survived, the family he raised, the pain he endured. Oscar described the guilt, the memories, and the moment he chose not to fire. At one point, Victor said quietly, "Your mercy gave me a life. Children, grandchildren, everything. You didn't just spare me. You made my life possible." Oscar wiped his eyes. It was one moment, one choice. Victor shook his head. No, it was the right choice when the world was making all the wrong ones. As the conversation flowed, both men realized something profound. They weren't defined by the sides they fought for, nor by the ideologies that forced them onto the battlefield. They were defined by a single moment of humanity shared between them. One act of mercy had cut through the brutality of war. Before parting ways, Victor handed Oscar a small wooden carving shaped like a dove. On the bottom was inscribed, "To the man who gave me peace before peace existed." Oscar held it tightly, tears in his eyes. They shook hands once more, longer, firmer, warmer than before. And as they parted, Oscar felt something he had not felt in decades. Wars are fought by nations, but peace is built by ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Oscar's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, when hatred feels inevitable and violence feels justified, compassion can still break through. A single act of mercy can echo across half a century, across families, across borders. If one man could spare his supposed enemy on the deadliest front of World War II, what could we spare today? A harsh word? A grudge? A chance to be right? Sometimes choosing mercy doesn't change the world, but it changes someone's world. And that is enough. If you'd like more true stories of humanity hiding inside history, feel free to explore the other videos on this channel. Thank you for watching.